FF6 TIN Cod. Before the Earth Federation had a single mobile suit, it had this. Rolled out by the Hervik Company around UC0062, the TIN Cod was a short-range atmospheric interceptor built to one specification above all others: be cheap and be everywhere. Its airframe was deliberately light, which gave it genuinely excellent handling, and deliberately undergunned, which is where the trouble started. 4 25mm machine guns sat in the nose, with 2 anti-air missile racks for anything it couldn't reach with bullets. Against another aircraft, that was enough. Against a Zaku II wrapped in super hard steel alloy, 25mm of ammunition was closer to an insult than an attack. So the TIN Cod spent the 1-year war doing the unglamorous job, sitting on runways, defending Federation air bases, dying in numbers, and yet it refused to disappear. Records place TIN Cod still flying during the Grips conflict of UC0087, a full quarter-century after introduction, with an improved TIN Cod 2 arriving in the UC0090s. FF4 toriares. Hervik's answer to a question nobody had asked yet: what if one small fighter could work in atmosphere and in vacuum? The toriares was a compact, rocket-propelled interceptor with just 2 25mm machine guns in the nose, designed to punch upward at assault craft and to swarm enemy positions in rapid saturation attacks, rather than duel anything one-on-one. On paper, in the peacetime UC0070s, it was elegant. Then the 1-year war broke out and physics turned on it. Zeon's Minovsky particles saturated the battlefield and blinded the toriares' sensors, stripping away the situational awareness a lightly armed fighter depends on to survive. Pilots were reduced to hunting by eye. Yu Kojima, later famous for the Blue Destiny units, flew toriares sorties on reconnaissance and at the Battle of Loom, and came out the other side having watched the type get comprehensively outclassed. Once the RGM-79GM entered mass production, the Federation quietly stopped pretending the toriares was a frontline machine. FF-S3 Saberfish. The Saberfish is what happens when a fighter is designed for a war that hasn't been invented yet. Hervik built it in UC0076 under the Federation's Year 70 armament reinforcement plan, taking the atmospheric FF-3 and making it space-capable. Chemical rockets for vacuum, jet engines for air, and 4 booster packs slung on the wings for extra kick. Armament was 4 25mm machine guns in the nose and 12 missiles carried in triple launchers on those boosters, with the option of a single large anti-ship missile underneath. Its deployment was inventively grim. Saberfish launched from Columbus-class carriers, and when there was no carrier, crews clamped them to the outer hulls of Salamis and Magellan-class warships and launched them off the ship's skin. With no armor and no melee capability, pilots stopped trying to fight mobile suits and swarmed support vessels instead. Astonishingly, the type survived. Saberfish appear in the Grips conflict and at the Torrington base attack in UC0096. Fly Manta, the workhorse. Officially the FF-B2, the Fly Manta was an atmospheric fighter bomber and the single most produced aircraft in the Earth Federation Air Force, which is a quieter kind of achievement than being the fastest or deadliest. 17 meters long, 13 wide, 6 high with the gear down, weighing 11.7 tons and capable of Mach 3.6, it hit a sweet spot the Federation kept failing to find elsewhere. Real speed, real agility, and enough cruising range to actually get somewhere. 2 automatic tracking 30mm Vulcan cannons handled close work, 6 missile launchers handled everything else, and a pair of munitions bays cut into the underside of the fuselage each swallowed a large bomb. Hardpoints under the wings took ground missiles or smart bombs, so the same airframe flew air superiority in the morning and close support in the afternoon. In the 08th MS team, it's constantly overhead, a flat gray delta shape cutting across the jungle canopy, doing the unspectacular work of an air force. Depp Rog. The biggest thing the Federation put in the sky during the 1-year war, and it looked it. The Depp Rog was a heavy tactical bomber measuring 33.5 meters long, 21.2 meters tall, and 31.5 meters across the wing, armored in universal duralumin, and driven by thermonuclear jet engines with supplementary rocket thrusters. It carried 7 people, which by 1-year war standards is a small village, 2 pilots, a navigator, a bombardier, and 3 dedicated gunners for the 5 laser cannons that formed its defensive belt. Anti-aircraft missiles covered the gaps, and the payload was laser-guided and imaging seeker bombs aimed at things that couldn't move. During Operation Odessa, the Depp Rog earned its keep flattening Zeon mining installations and hammering forest positions, but it was never able to defend itself properly and never pretended otherwise. Every mission needed a fighter escort. As mobile weapons took over the battlefield, the type was retired rather than replaced. Don Escargot. Somebody in the Federation remembered that most of Earth is water. The Don Escargot was a purpose-built anti-submarine attack aircraft, operating out of naval bases with a 2-pilot crew and a full suite of sonar detection gear for finding things hiding underneath the ocean. It's an odd-looking machine even by universal century standards, using an unconventional twin-wing arrangement wrapped around a fat fuselage built to swallow ordnance. The loadout was layered for one job. Anti-submarine missiles handled precise guided strikes on a located target. Depth charges handled the situation where you know roughly where the enemy is and would like a wide area to stop existing. 4 machine guns, 2 forward and 2 aft, covered the aircraft itself. Max Brower and Jimmy Will are among the named pilots on record. Most remarkable is its lifespan. Designed by Kunio Okawara for the original Mobile Suit Gundam, the Don Escargot stayed in Federation service all the way to UC-0090. Dish. A flying dinner plate with a war to fight. The Dish was the Federation's airborne early warning and control aircraft, and its entire design is a single enormous radome, a disc-shaped fuselage almost totally occupied by a long-range radar array intended to see the battlefield before anyone in it could see back. It was also, from the day the war started, obsolete. Minovsky particle dispersion scrambles electromagnetic radiation, and a radar aircraft in a Minovsky-saturated sky is an expensive machine that cannot do the one thing it exists to do. Rather than scrap them, the Federation repurposed the fleet as high-speed transport for senior officers, which is how General Revel came to travel by Dish to Belfast on an inspection tour. Armament was a single defensive machine gun, because nobody expected it to fight. Modernized versions were still in service in UC-0096, when one was recorded aboard the Ra Kalem. FX-550 Gunperry. Not a fighter, a delivery van with missiles, and arguably more important than half the fighters on this list. The Gunperry was the Federation's general-purpose transport, using 3 rotors for vertical takeoff so it never needed a runway, and 4 jet engines for forward flight at up to around 430 kilometers per hour. 2 crew flew it, 12 passengers could ride in the fuselage, and slung beneath the aircraft was a detachable container that split open on delivery. That container is the point. It carried a complete mobile suit or the RX-78-2 Gundam's replacement components, straight to a front line that had no airfield, no crane, and no time. 6 large missiles could be mounted along the container's flanks, so the Gunperry wasn't entirely helpless while hovering at its most vulnerable moment. It appears throughout the original series and the 08th MS team, usually arriving at the exact moment somebody's mobile suit has stopped working. FFX-7 Core Fighter. The most consequential small aircraft in the franchise, and it started as a safety feature. Developed under Project V alongside the Gundam itself, the FFX-7 was a compact fighter that doubled as the RX-78-2's cockpit block. That's the core block system. The mobile suit's torso separates, the pilot flies away, and the Federation keeps the one resource it genuinely could not mass-produce: an experienced pilot. It was skinned in the same Luna titanium alloy as the Gundam, just thinner, and armed with twin 60mm Vulcans in the nose plus a single beam gun underneath for a fighting chance against a mobile suit. The same system let ground crews assemble and swap major components in the field. A Muro Ray survived situation after situation in it, including atmospheric re-entry and the final battle at Abawa Ku. Nearly every core block design that follows, GP01, ZZ, Victory, is downstream of this one small, ugly, brilliant idea: G-Fighter. The Federation's attempt to build a fighter and a mobile suit upgrade kit in the same box. The G-Fighter was assembled from 2 modules collectively called the G-Parts. The A-Parts formed the nose, with a canopy-style cockpit and 2 beam cannons, and carried caterpillar treads that went unused in the standard configuration. The B-Parts formed the main fuselage, housing 4 thrusters, with rotating wing bases so each end could function as either an intake or an exhaust depending on how the craft was assembled. Flown alone, it was a heavily armed support fighter. Docked with the RX-78-2 and its core fighter, it became the G-Armor, a flying armored brick that could carry the Gundam across a continent without draining it. It could combine with the Gundam in essentially every configuration except underwater. The theatrical compilation films cut it entirely in favor of the core booster, a decision fans have been relitigating for 4 decades. G-Sky. proof that the G-parts were a modular system rather than a single vehicle. The G-Sky was a support fighter formed by mating the FFX-7 core fighter with the G-fighter's B-parts, carrying the Gundam's legs along in the bargain, a configuration that let White Base's crew keep components mobile and combat-ready, instead of parked in a hangar waiting to be shot at. There was a stripped variant, the G-Sky Easy, which dispensed with the mobile suit components entirely and flew as a leaner core fighter and booster pairing. The G-Sky first saw combat on 11 November UC-0079, during Operation Odessa, the vast Federation offensive to retake Zeon's European mining territory. The whole idea is deeply of its era, a mid-war Federation with too few Gundams and too many missions, endlessly recombining the same handful of parts into whatever shape that day's battle demanded. It is Lego logic, applied to total war, and it worked. FF Lino's Eurex 7BS core booster. Take the core fighter, decide it isn't nearly enough, and bolt a war onto it. Developed under Project V, the core booster added armor plating, heavier weapons, and a dedicated booster module to the basic airframe, producing a 13.8-meter support fighter capable of Mach 5.38 in atmosphere and powered by an NC-3-type nuclear fusion generator behind Luna titanium armor. Armament was serious for something with one seat. 4 25mm machine cannons, 2 megaparticle cannons mounted on the booster module, 2 missile launchers, and an optional bomb bay carrying 2 multi-warhead bombs. It was also brutally expensive. Only 16 were built during the entire one-year war, and just 6 ever saw combat. Sayla Mass and Slegger Law flew them off the White Base, and it's Sleggers that everyone remembers. He drove his crippled core booster into the MA-08 Big Zam to crack it open, and did not come back. FFB 7 Beast Jet Core Booster 2. The lesson the Federation learned from bolting a space booster onto an atmospheric fighter was, stop bolting things together. Hervik built the Jet Core Booster 2 as an integrated atmospheric fighter bomber from the ground up, keeping the FFX-7 core fighter's nose section, cockpit, avionics, gun mounts already proven, and attaching an entirely new body behind it. Crucially, the hybrid rocket and jet propulsion of the original was thrown out in favor of dedicated thermonuclear jet engines tuned purely for air-breathing flight, which is why it handles like an aircraft rather than a spacecraft that happens to be in the sky. 4 Vulcan guns sat in the nose, 2 missile launchers covered medium range, and an internal bomb bay let it stay over a target through a sustained campaign. In November UC-0079, it flew a major bombing operation against a concealed Zeon mountain base in Southeast Asia, the sequence it's best known for in the 08th MS team. DFA-03 DOP, Zeon's only atmospheric fighter of the entire one-year war, which tells you exactly how much the Principality cared about aircraft once it had mobile suits. The DOP is 9.2 meters long, 4.6 tall, spans 12.1 meters, and weighs 5.2 tons at maximum, flown by a single pilot behind a chemical fuel jet engine. 2 6-tube missile launchers ride on top of the fuselage with a 20mm Vulcan gun built into the tip of each. In a turning fight, it could outmaneuver most Federation aircraft in every other measurement: cruise speed, range, rate of climb. Its poor aerodynamics made it miserable, and it drank fuel fast enough that operations depended on secured ground depots, GAW carriers, or Dabood-class land battleships. Garma Zabi personally led a DOP attack on the White Base, and the Gundam sheared a wing clean off his aircraft. Once Federation mobile suits arrived, the DOP's guns simply stopped mattering. P-01B Luggun, Zeon's Eyes. The Luggun was a mass-produced reconnaissance aircraft, 12.4 meters long, 8.8 meters tall, with a 22.8-meter wingspan, and a crew of pilot and co-pilot sitting in a distinctly raised cockpit. Its defining feature is a pair of radomes held out on long struts, and the clever part is that those struts rotate. Swing the radomes above the fuselage and it works as an anti-aircraft radar picket. Swing them below and it becomes a ground surveillance platform. It had VTOL capability and enough raw thrust to lift a mobile suit briefly, which made it useful far outside its job description. For self-defense, it carried twin 20mm machine guns, 1 per wing, on rotatable and adjustable mounts, 4 missile launchers, and a small bomb bay. Char Aznavour and Norris Packard both logged time in 1. Post-war, Lugguns kept flying with PMC Themis and Zeon remnant forces as late as UC-0096. Dodai YS. Zeon built the Dodai YS as an interceptor bomber, then discovered it had accidentally solved a much larger problem. Its space-designed mobile suits couldn't fly in atmosphere, and the dodai's flat 20.3-meter deck and powerful engines meant a Zaku or a Goof could simply stand on top of it and be carried into battle, firing the whole way. That turned a mediocre bomber into a devastating airborne weapons platform, and it wrecked Federation ground defenses that had no answer for a mobile suit arriving at altitude. It achieved vertical takeoff through intakes on the upper surface feeding lift jets underneath, carried a crew of 2 pilots and an officer, and mounted 8 forward missile launchers, reduced to 6 on South Seas Alliance variants. It paired best with the MS-07B Goof, whose forehead antenna handled communication with the aircraft. Its armor was thin enough that Vulcan fire could kill it, yet Dodai YS units were still flying in UC-0096. Gattle. Classified as a space-fast heavy combat bomber, the Gattle was Zeon's answer to the fact that vacuum warfare existed before mobile suits did. Built as a successor to the earlier Gobble, it carried a 2-seat cockpit, pilot and co-pilot, that doubled as an escape capsule, fitted with small rockets that could push the crew clear for a short period after the rest of the aircraft came apart. It had no AMBAC system, relying on attitude control verniers, but its thermonuclear rocket engines were strong enough to give it speeds comparable to contemporary mobile suits. 4 fixed 30mm Vulcan guns sat under the cockpit, backed by 5 tube missile launchers on each side unit, and 2 pylons for large anti-ship missiles. It fought from the 1-week battle to a Bowie AQ before being pushed back to defending fortresses and Dolos-class carriers. Its engine technology later fed the MS-21C Drah-C, and surviving airframes ended up doing civilian work. GAW, an entire air force in one aircraft and a deeply compromised machine. The GAW was an atmospheric attack carrier, 147.4 meters long, 72.4 meters tall, spanning 159.4 meters, and grossing 690.4 tons, carrying 8 DOP fighters and 3 mobile suits into a theater with no friendly airbase. 18 thermonuclear jet engines drove it, and here is the fatal number. Roughly 30% of total thrust had to be aimed downward simply to keep the thing airborne. What remained had to do everything else, and its steering was effectively vertical only, making it slow, ponderous, and easy to attack. Armament was 3 twin megaparticle guns on retractable rotating mounts, multiple anti-aircraft turrets, and a bomb bay for carpet bombing. Garma Zabi was killed commanding 1, which permanently fixed the GAW in Gundam's memory as a coffin with wings. A pirate-operated GAW was still being hunted down over New Guinea in UC-0096. Dodai Kai. Nothing convinces an army like being on the receiving end. Having spent the 1-year war watching Zeon mobile suits ride Dodai YS platforms into its own airspace, the Earth Federation adopted the concept outright, and the Dodai Kai, literally the modified Dodai, is the result. A Federation-operated refinement of a captured Zeon idea, updated engines and avionics wrapped around the same flat carrier deck. By the Grips conflict of UC-0087, it was standard equipment, hauling Hizax and Maraseis over terrain that would otherwise have swallowed them, used by the Titans, by Karaba, and by anyone who needed a mobile suit somewhere it couldn't walk to. It's a small, telling piece of Universal Century history. The Subflight system began as Zeon improvisation and ended as Federation doctrine. The design lineage runs directly from the Dodai YS, through the Dodai Kai, and into the base Jabber, which is where the concept finally stopped being a bomber conversion. Base Jabber. The endpoint of a 20-year evolution that started with a Zeon bomber. The base Jabber was the Earth Federation's purpose-built subflight system, and unlike its ancestors, it wasn't converted from anything. It was designed from scratch to carry mobile suits. 2 large jet engines mounted either side of the main body handled high-speed forward flight, while 4 large hoverjets on the underside gave it vertical takeoff and landing, so it could lift 1 or 2 mobile suits from anywhere flat. A single megaparticle cannon under the forward cockpit meant it wasn't defenseless if it got caught alone. It entered service during the Grips conflict of UC-0087, and worked so well that the Federation kept iterating on it, fielding Type 89 and Type 94 variants that were still in use through the UC-0090s. That longevity is the whole story. Base Jabbers appear from Zeta Gundam right through to Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway. FF-92 Core Fighter II. The Core Block System's second act. Built by Anaheim Electronics for the Gundam Development Project, the FF-XOE served as the cockpit module and escape craft of the RX-78 GP-01 Zephyranthes, reviving an idea the Federation had largely abandoned after the 1-year war in favor of cheaper, simpler mass-produced designs. Anaheim's engineers weren't building for cost. They were building a flagship prototype. And a flagship prototype gets the expensive feature that keeps its test pilot alive. Operating from the Albion in UC-0083 with Ku Araki in the seat, the Core Fighter II was tuned for atmospheric performance, which suited the GP-01's original terrestrial mission profile and became a genuine limitation the moment the fight moved into vacuum. That mismatch is the entire plot engine of Stardust Memory's middle act, and it's why the second version of this aircraft exists at all. The GP-01 nearly died because its core module was built for the wrong sky. FF-CIDFB Full Vernian Core Fighter II. The fix. After the GP-01 was crippled fighting in space with atmospheric equipment, Anaheim rebuilt the Core Fighter II's entire rear section around a boost pod, dramatically improving mobility and maneuverability in vacuum by turning the core module into the mobile suit's primary thruster system. The resulting RX-78 GP-01FB Zephyranthes Full Vernian is one of the most aggressively over-engined Gundams ever put on screen, a Minovsky-type ultra-compact fusion reactor rated at 2,045 kilowatts, total thruster output of 234,000 kilograms from 4 45,000 kilogram and 4 13,500 kilogram units, and a 180-degree turn completed in 0.8 seconds. It stands 19.5 meters overall, 18.5 to the head, with an empty weight of 43.2 tons, and a maximum gross of 74 tons behind Gundarium alloy armor, carrying twin fire-linked 60mm head Vulcans and 2 beam sabers racked in the backpack. It is, functionally, a fighter engine wearing a Gundam. FFXTI BST Core Booster 2. The obscure one. Built by Anaheim Electronics and first deployed on 12 December UC-0082, the Core Booster 2 served as the fighter element of the core block system for the RX-78 GP-00 Blossom, the Gundam Development Project's forgotten zeroth unit, a reconnaissance and testing machine that never got an anime of its own. Its pilot flew from a standard canopy-style cockpit, and the mission equipment tells you exactly what it was for. Sensors plus a Minovsky Particle Interference Wave Searcher, or MPWIS, mounted on the main body. A system designed to find things in exactly the particle-saturated conditions that had blinded Federation aircraft throughout the one-year war. Fixed armament was a long-range beam rifle slung under the main body and 2 beam sabers that doubled as beam guns. Official documentation lists most of its dimensions and propulsion figures as simply unknown, which is fitting for a craft built to see without being seen. FXA-07GB Neo Core Fighter. Anaheim Electronics took the Federation's core block principles and scaled them up for the MSZ-010ZZ Gundam, a mobile suit that splits into 3 separate aircraft: the core top, the core base, and this. The Neo Core Fighter measures 11.62 meters long with a 15.89 meter wingspan, weighs 11.6 tons at maximum gross, and pushes 20,960 kilograms of thrust from 4 5,240 kilogram rocket thrusters, which makes it genuinely, seriously quick. What it is not is dangerous. Its entire armament is a pair of Vulcan guns in the nose, weapons that are close to useless against a mobile suit's armor and completely irrelevant to a warship. So its pilots used it for what it was actually good at: reconnaissance, intelligence gathering, and being a fast-moving distraction while somebody else did the killing. For Judao Ashta and the Argama's teenage crew, it was also the thing that let them survive losing the ZZ LM312V04 Victory Gundam Core Fighter. By UC-0153, the core block system had become the whole design philosophy. The League Militaires' Victory Gundam is built as 3 parts around its core fighter: the fighter itself, the top limb, the upper body, nicknamed the hangar, and the bottom limb, nicknamed the boots. The core fighter can dock with just the top to become the top fighter, or just the bottom to become the bottom fighter, so a partially destroyed Victory keeps fighting in a reduced configuration instead of dying. The complete machine runs 15.2 meters overall, 7.6 tons base and 17.7 tons fully loaded, with an output of 4,780 kilowatts, and mounts 8 hardpoints spread across the arms, side armor, and legs. It also carries the Minovsky Flight System, a simplified Minovsky craft unit that holds the machine aloft at any altitude, so its rockets and verniers can spend every gram of thrust on maneuver rather than on staying up. TSMA2 Mod. .00 Mobius 0. A different universe, the same problem. What do you fly when your side has no mobile suits? The Earth Alliance's answer, developed before the First Alliance plant war, was this space combat mobile armor, and its main weapons are 4 wired gun barrels, each mounting 2 autocannons, that detach from the main body to attack a target from every direction at once. Docked, those same gun barrels double as extra thrusters, boosting speed and maneuverability. Underneath sits a linear gun, weaker than a beam weapon but powerful enough to gut a mobile suit or punch through a warship's hull. The catch is human. Controlling 4 independent gun platforms in 3 dimensions demands spatial awareness almost nobody possesses, natural or coordinator, so only a small number were built. Mula Flaga could do it, and became the Hawk of Endymion for it. The pilot who fought Zaft's mobile suits in a fighter and kept winning. TSMA-2 Mobius. What the Alliance built when it accepted that most pilots are not Mula Flaga. The Mobius is the mass-produced descendant of the Mobius Zero, stripped of the gun barrel system that made its ancestor lethal, and rebuilt around something an ordinary natural conscript could operate in a few weeks. A linear gun and missile armament, simple controls, and a production line that could keep pace with losses. It became the backbone of Earth Alliance Space Forces in Cosmic Era 71, and it is remembered almost entirely for how it died. At Endymion and at Loom, Mobius squadrons met Zaft Djinns, real mobile suits with real armor and real maneuverability, and were destroyed in numbers that reshaped the war, and at Loom, ended with a nuclear exchange. Everything that follows in Gundam Seed, including the G project that produces the Strike, exists because the Mobius was not enough. F-7D Spearhead, the exception that proves fighters weren't finished. Officially, the F-7D Spearhead multipurpose air superiority fighter, built by Propulsion and Machinery Progress, it's a twin-engine VTOL aircraft using a close-coupled delta configuration with canard wings mounted ahead of the cockpit. Armament is 4 20mm machine guns, an internal weapon bay, and 6 missiles in a drum-type launcher. What makes it matter is gravity. Mobile suits are enormously restricted flying inside an atmosphere, and the Spearhead was fast enough and long-legged enough to outperform Zaft's AMF-101 Din in both speed and cruising range, losing on firepower and turning ability, but winning where it counted. By August of Cosmic Era 71, large numbers were stationed at the Alliance headquarters at Josh A, where they engaged Zaft mobile suits head-on during Operation Spitbreak. Mula Flaga used one to reach the Archangel and put it down inside the ship's hangar in an emergency landing. FX-550 Skygrasper. The last aircraft on this list is also the smartest idea on it. Developed directly from the F-7D Spearhead, the Skygrasper was built to support the GAT X-105 Strike Gundam, and its defining trick is that it can carry the Strike's striker packs. A mobile suit that has to fly home to the Archangel every time it needs different weapons is a mobile suit that isn't fighting. The Skygrasper delivers a new pack mid-battle instead. It's dangerous in its own right too, with a turret-mounted beam cannon, 2 heavy machine guns, 4 light machine guns and 2 missile bays, and it can use the packs it carries, the Ale Striker's thrusters for speed, the Sword Striker's anti-ship sword and rocket anchor up close, the Launcher Striker's beam cannon at range. 2 were built, flown by Mula Flaga, Kira Yamato, Tole Koenig and Kagala Yula Atha, and they did not all come home. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.